I've not met anybody that can pack so much into such a short time as Nancy Neampton. She's amazing. I'd like to take you to the next panelist, Ian MacPherson. Ian is many things, a professor emeritus in history, founding director of the British Columbia Institute for Cooperative Studies in Victoria, co-director of the Social Economy Hub. He's written 17 books, numerous articles, probably made 300 plus presentations around the world in many, many countries. He is been around, let's put it that way. The board of the BC Central Credit Union from 83 to 92, president for 2 years of that time, nationally on many boards, Canadian Cooperative Credit Society, Cooperative College of Canada, Cooperative Union of Canada, and one of the major constituencies here, the Canadian Cooperative Association, of which he was the founding president from 1989 to 1993. He's also been on the board of the International Cooperative Alliance and chaired the process and wrote the documents where the international rules of cooperative organizations, which we often refer to as the Rochdale Rules, were revised in Manchester in 1995. So, Ian, please come forward. We welcome you, and we look forward to your comments.
How many minutes do I have? Combien? 4. 10. Andy Warhol promised me 15. Anyway. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Mike for his generous introduction. I would particularly like to thank CCEDNet and the people at CCEDNet for organizing this conference. It's not simple. Not easy bringing the groups together, finding location. All the complexities of conferencing, it seemed to me, were magnified here. I particularly want to thank Mike Toy for his stellar efforts and careful devotion to this task. The talk I'm going to give is my own. My fellow co-director, Rupert Downing, need not take any responsibility for any of this. Unless there's thunderous applause, then of course he might want to do that. And it hasn't been passed by the board. So, with all of that said, probably about 20 years ago, I started hearing words about the knowledge economy. I didn't pay much attention to it, to be honest, because it didn't make any sense to me. It is what my English teacher in Prescott, Ontario, not far from here, grade 13, Miss Evanson, 5'2", with eyes that gave power a sergeant major would envy. She would not tolerate such language because it's a tautology, it's unnecessary. You cannot have an economy without knowledge. So anyone who singles it out, I think is somewhat questionable. It's like a new innovation. Innovations are always new. Gifts are free. Planning is forward. And then my very favorite on the business channels, going forward. And at home, they can hear me scream when I hear that. Because what other way are they going? Well, there's probably an argument to be made there. Anyway, information, the knowledge-based economy is what I want to focus this on today. My first reaction to it was that it is a tautology. Knowledge is central to any economy. Its role in Canadian economic activity has been there from the beginning, when the Indigenous peoples here, and not far exactly from this place, in fact, exchanged in trade with their Indigenous neighbors long before the Europeans. It was based on knowledge. When the Europeans came and engaged in trade with the Indigenous peoples and the flotillas of fur went down the Ottawa River, that too was based on knowledge, in fact, incredible knowledge. The historians who study that are always amazed at how meticulous and how careful and how extensive that knowledge became. Right? When they ran the timber down the Ottawa, the same, and I could go on and on. Every big cycle in Canadian history, every economic change has been underlain by knowledge. And one can go back farther to the Tigris and the Euphrates, to the Nile, to the Yangtze, to the Andean highlands, and you will find big shifts in knowledge that explain major economic changes or contribute to it at least. So knowledge is central. And when you think of the rise of labor and capital, now when I was young, which is within dim memory now, but when I was, we were taught that the two dominant forces in the economy and that shaped much of our lives were capital and labor. And you lined up on one side or the other depending upon your inclinations. Right? You went to business school or you become a working class historian. Right? And that paradigm is very important because even if you watch the media today, the divisions may be muted and changed a little bit, but that's what they talk about as differing views, often. And what is important for both capital and labor, in their days of rising in influence, they were profoundly interested in knowledge, in education. The labor movement had an incredible record of information training and education, public information. Many of the movements here, in fact, are continuations of those efforts from another day. So knowledge was central, and they built them into big clusters of great importance, and we hear them. And so it isn't surprising to think about knowledge as one of the key drivers of economic development. And it's particularly significant, it seems to me, that in recent days, capital in particular, but also labor, have exerted a lot of input, a lot of attention, put a lot of resources into the creation of knowledge to support their cases. The roles of think tanks, the roles of academics supported by them is extremely important. And it becomes the basis upon which they make their cases. Right? You cannot understand the rise of the new conservatism in North America and elsewhere without looking at some of that. It's not insignificant that one of the first things Mr. Manning did in forming his party was to create a kind of think tank for it. Right? A center for deep intellectual activity. You may agree or disagree, it's not important whether you do. It was the strategy that was important. Now the social economy, which to me is very much like the people-centered economy. If someone wants to explain the difference, I'd be glad to hear that. But it has been on the side. It has been on the also-rans. Right? It's never had that kind of intellectual strength and vigor and vitality. And that's the problem, in my view. What we are is a clustering of a number of very well-meaning people doing very important and good things, but we do not have the force. And we won't have it until we have the intellectual strength and vigor. Ultimately, we are about ideas or about nothing. So the social economy has had an uneven, or the people-centered economy, an uneven development of knowledge. But more recently, everyone talks about the knowledge economy, and here the OECD, back as early as 1996, that's some years ago now, made its statement on the power of knowledge as the driver of productivity and economic growth, leading to a new focus on the role of information technology, etc. Or pick another one from the World Development Report of the Bank. For countries in the vanguard of the world economy, the essence of this quotation is that knowledge is much more important than anything else. So we in the people-centered economy, the social economy, ignore our knowledge base or use it only in part at our risk. We tend, like many others in capital and labor, if you like, we tend to think in terms of the instrumentalist uses of research. Creates jobs, facilitates trade, its role in what I think of this easy globalization. You know, every great shift in thought and understanding has led to an expansion of easy globalization. The Spanish, the Chinese, the Americans. And it was all accompanied by knowledge that suddenly gave them new power. And they used it. And it was easy, and it was nice. Disease and the consequences of it may not have been thought of too often, but there it was. Well, knowledge and the instrumentalist use of research was very important in the easy globalization of the last 40 years. And all we have to do is to learn how to mobilize our knowledge and our technologies to take advantage of what they gave us. What'd you go back there for? Because you pushed the wrong button, that's why, you know. Okay, funds and positions for research. Everybody does this. God, we've got a budget crisis, let's see if we can find some research money. Right, we all do it. It's not a good reason for research. So, the larger knowledge possibilities, the roles of mostly conservative think tanks. There are some on the labor, or if you want, on the left, but mostly that. And the creation of, I read an interesting book recently, maybe some of you have too, Janine Waddell, Shadow Elite, which describes how people, small group of people, utilize think tanks and knowledge to move flexibly across the world. Take a look at it sometime, and you'll see in there what I'm trying to get at, perhaps. Research, knowledge, flexibility, and that's what shapes a lot of our decisions. So, the top 10 distinguishing features of research into the people-centered economy. If it's good enough for Dave, it's good enough for me. Concerned with communities, obvious, but we're also different in how we are concerned with communities. We see communities in different lights, we listen to different voices, we try to understand how they see what is happening. And as we heard last night, communities are very sensitive in ways that other congregations of people are not, about what's happening and what the impact is. Could go on that for a long time. There are different views and understandings that come out, and I won't repeat what Nancy said, because it's here, right? And they come out of communities, and trying to make a chorus out of it is not easy. Matters of culture, it's an interesting one and an important one. We cannot avoid culture. Now, there were attempts in the expansion of the North Atlantic to ignore culture, right? But we can't, because culture is very central to much of what we do. We have values, and I'm not going to read these. It comes from, if you're interested, they're from Social Economy Europe. Maybe they're the most applicable. They're kind of awkwardly translated, I think. But you can go through them, and I think most people here would probably ascribe to them. But they are important, and values are central to what we do. They shape our work. The importance for specific groups or groupings. We heard last night a voice from the women's group that met here yesterday and the feminist perspectives on all of this. And the points were very well made. There's much more that will be said, I am sure. I'm going to have to leave this afternoon because we have a grouping of young people in Montreal tomorrow, and their voices are different. They're much smarter than we were, for one thing, but they see it differently from us being people of a certain age. Indigenous people, I spent a couple of days in Edmonton with the Cree Nations, and it was fascinating to listen to them think about these issues. The need to treasure institutional variety, this is very important. We in the Western intellectual tradition have an incredible preoccupation with hierarchy. Listen to our conversations. What do we say? Very soon, if not immediately, who's on top? Who's got the power? Who's got the money? There are reasons for that, but it's not very good thinking for us. We are interested in circles, not pyramids. And those in the social economy who would like to see a pyramid with all these little soldiers underneath, I think are wrong. those of us who would like to think of some way in which these circles interconnect, support and help and learn from each other. That's what we want. And each institutional reform deserves respect. Okay? It needs its own field of inquiry. It needs its own understandings. Need to honor different modes, objectives, and styles of research and knowledge. We'll go back and forth on this. Need to embrace international perspectives. We've seen it last night. You'll hear more of it today. The moving beyond instrumentalism, okay, which is where I think we often bog down when we think about research and thought. We really have to find the key to do something better. Engaging with others. I was going to speak a bit on this, but I guess I don't have time. I think we need to engage people who, in the for-profit sector, attempt to do things better. We should honor that, pay it the respect it deserves. It's not easy for them to do that, probably, and we can learn something from that. And we are not the fount of all wisdom. Most of it, but not all. And similarly, in the trade union movement, those were heartening sounds last night. For a long time, the trades union and our movements tended to be somewhat adrift, and I credit that largely to Gomperism and the pursuit of better salaries and pensions, etc., on the labor side, and then intolerance and ignorance on the other. So I just want to conclude, because I feel the circles gathering here. In all of this, I've come to accept, even to welcome, the idea that knowledge should be seen, along with capital and labor, as one of the most important drivers of the economy, one of the most important determinants of how we and our children live. I've tried to argue that the ways in which we accumulate knowledge, those were the 10, there could be more, who is involved, where it comes from, how and for what purposes it is applied, have the possibility of contributing powerfully to, and perhaps even shaping, a new intellectual paradigm, an integrated set of new and forceful ideas based on sound research and a strong resource base. We need to continue pursuing the development of instrumental knowledge, but we also need to reach out beyond that. The kind of knowledge we develop is not created by any one group, be they academic, activist, or participant, but rather it is the accumulated best understandings of us all, developed in mutualism. It is, I think, qualitatively different from other forms of social and economic knowledge, which tends to start from narrower focus, but it is not unconnected. It would require some sacrifice, working across barriers that have for too long impeded, and mutual respect on a level we have not yet fully achieved. In the end, though, we have the opportunity to contribute to the forging of a better world, perhaps the only world we have a chance to know. I know of no other collectivity that could do more. And on another level, we have no choice. If we wish to adhere to the values we say we endorse, the values we preach to others. Thank you.